So you work a full-time job, but you also want to maintain a regular art practice that allows you to flourish as an artist without feeling creatively burnt out. It's not easy to do, but it's something that I've been doing for a couple of years now, and kind of along the way, I've picked up a good number of tips and tricks that have helped me to strike this balance. I know that there are a lot of you out there who are in a similar position to the one that I am, where you're balancing either a full-time job or other full-time responsibilities that take a lot of your time and energy while also trying to maintain a regular art practice. So I want to share a list of 7 things that have helped me continue to create artwork regularly without feeling creatively burnt out. I'm going to share a list of both practical things that I do, as well as some mindset things that I found to be really important in helping me overcome some of the many hurdles that those of you who are in this position know exist that can make working full-time and making art regularly a super challenging thing to do. Okay, so let's jump right into it with number 1, leave your art supplies somewhere where they are easily accessible. This might be advice that you've heard before, but it's genuinely been so helpful to me to do this really intentionally. And this doesn't mean just like leaving clutter around your house. But for those of you who have some kind of dedicated studio space, this might be a little bit easier to do than those of you who are like me, who create most of your artwork in your living spaces. If you've been following my art journey, you'll know that I paint like 99% of all of my paintings while sitting at my kitchen table, because that's just the best space that I have for it in my current apartment setup. So I have had to be a little bit creative about what it means and what it looks like for me to leave my art supplies somewhere where they are accessible. But if you're in a similar situation where you feel like you can't just leave all of your art stuff out in a living space because you need it for other things, don't let that stop you from figuring out ways to make this work for you. So for example, for me, even though I need to kind of clear off my kitchen table every time I paint so that I can, use it as a kitchen table, I have this little counter right behind the kitchen table. It's literally right next to my stove top where I keep all of my painting stuff. So I have all of my paints, my paintbrushes, my papers, everything that I use regularly stays right there so that I can literally just pivot. I don't even have to move to start painting again. Another tip for those of you who paint like me, especially I use acrylic gouache if you use those, or if you use acrylics, using a stay wet palette has been a huge help for me in terms of leaving my art supplies accessible. So I either use this massive stay wet palette that I have, or I just do a DIY one using one of these little quarter sheet pans and paper towel and parchment paper. Either way, it works really well. And it's a great way for me to not feel like I have to clean up all of my paints every time I paint and then reset them out again every single time I want to sit down to paint. So I fully recommend doing something like that, where as much as possible, no matter what kind of artwork you can create, minimize that barrier to entry anywhere you can, so that when you have a spare 10 minutes to create artwork, it doesn't take you 15 minutes to set everything up. Okay, the second tip that I have is to set yourself really intentional time limits and stick to them. Genuinely, this has been such a hack for me, especially over the past year or so. Truly, I think that there are so many benefits to setting yourself really strict time constraints around creating your artwork, especially when you're trying to balance it with other things in your crazy schedule. Because honestly, one of the main reasons that I love setting time limits around creating my artwork is not actually for scheduling purposes, but it's because it's a great way for me to loosen up my art style and to stop overthinking everything and to really just focus on the big picture and not be so obsessive over every single little brushstroke. But it also has the huge benefit of allowing you to fit more artwork into smaller windows of time. So if it's one of those nights where, I've gotten home from work, I've done dinner, I've done all the things that I have to do in my real life, and I'm sitting there like, I really probably should go to bed pretty soon here, but I have 20 minutes. I can set a timer for 20 minutes and say I'm going to do what I'm going to do in 20 minutes and then call it a day. I've done this exercise a few times where I've painted the same subject in different amounts of times. So I have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel where I talk about this, so I'll leave a link to those here. But it's a pretty fun exercise, and honestly, I often find myself liking the paintings that I do in a smaller window of time more than the paintings where I give myself more time to do them, because I like the loose, a little bit chaotic look that you get when you do that kind of artwork. So anyway, set yourself time limits. It really, really helps. All right, the third tip is to limit the materials that you're using. So this is kind of related to the last tip about limiting your time, but sometimes sometimes there are some nights when I get home from work and I truly just can't be bothered to get all of my painting stuff out, because even doing my best to keep it all accessible and ready to go, it still is a little bit of a production to get my paper and my different paints that I'm using and set up my water and then get all of my brushes, and then sometimes I use things on top of my paints, like colored pencils or oil pastels or whatever. And sometimes I'm just like, not today. I just can't do it today. So in those instances, sometimes I find it really valuable to limit myself to just one tool. So most often for me, this is like a pen or a marker in my sketchbook. Nothing fancy, nothing crazy. And I find that by just using one tool, it takes off a lot of pressure to create some masterpiece, especially when I do it in my sketchbook, because at that point I'm really just doing it to maintain a regular art practice and often just to practice my observational drawing skills or figure out other ways to loosen up my artwork. So if you know me, you know that I'm drawing my cats like all the time. I have 3 of them, so there's plenty of references at any point in time. So often what I'll do is I'll take my one pen and my sketchbook and I'll literally just follow my cats around the apartment and I will draw them. And it's a really, really great way to take the pressure off of myself to like create some beautiful masterpiece. But it feels really good to be intentionally creating that artwork and to know that by doing that I am still building my art skills and still figuring out things that work well for me, things that I like, things that I don't like. So it's a really valuable thing to do still, even if you aren't creating some masterpiece that is going to hang on some person's wall somewhere, So limit your materials. And beyond that, sometimes I really like the way it looks when you limit your materials. Like if you just have your one pen, or sometimes you could do like a pen and one colored marker or something like that. It can actually create a spread that looks really cohesive and kind of cool. So limit your materials. You might love the way that it turns out. All right, this 4th tip is to make art even when you don't feel inspired. So sometimes, I'll be honest, I feel really drained, super tired from being at work all day, and then again, coming home and doing all the other life things that I do after work. And in those days, I really feel like I don't have it in me to make artwork. But at the same time, I know that I have this goal of continuing to create and develop my art skills. And beyond that, I also know in my heart of hearts that creating artwork is something that brings me joy, even if I'm feeling really tired. So sometimes in those moments when I am feeling tired and I am feeling uninspired, I decide to force myself to create something anyway. And 99% of the time, I don't regret it. Sorry if you hear any little background noise here. I'm gonna do my best to cut it out, but of course, right now is a great time to be replacing the siding on this apartment, so. But anyway, when I decide to create artwork in these moments, almost every single time I find this newfound energy, even when I was feeling tired and uninspired. Once I kind of get into the swing of things, I often fall into this creative flow and end up being really grateful and happy that I decided to start creating artwork. You'll hear this for all kinds of things, but truly, genuinely, the biggest hurdle is just showing up. And so it can be a massive mental hurdle to get to that point, to just sit down and create your artwork, because there's so many reasons why we can't do it, I'm too tired, work was really hard today, it's too late, nothing around me feels inspiring. But you might be like me, and once you get started, none of that actually matters. And again, this is like a topic for a whole other video, but don't put pressure on yourself to create a masterpiece, especially in those moments. Just because the artwork that you're creating isn't something that would sit in a museum collection somewhere doesn't mean that it's not really valuable to you and to your art practice. Something related to this feeling of, feeling uninspired is that probably 99% of the time that I'm painting at night, in the dark. And the truth is that I do feel more inspired during the day when the sun is out, when it's really beautiful outside and I get all of this wonderful natural light. But I'm at work during the day. I'm usually in the office or I'm working from home and I can't sit down and create artwork while the sun is still out. And yes, that's a bummer. As much as I would love to create artwork during the day, I can't. And that's okay. Most of the time I make art when it's dark, sitting at my kitchen table, when it's pitch black outside and I'm using the bright white kind of fluorescent light in my kitchen, and I make it work. And again, waiting for inspiration to strike is really going to limit you in when you feel like you can create. And so you basically need to trick yourself to feel inspired, knowing that most of the time, once you get started, that inspiration will come. All right, Alicia's back, so hang on. Hi, Mama. Come here. Hey, lady. I'm gonna lay down. Ooh, a big snort. Hi, lady. We're getting some good snorts from Alicia. She's just off camera. I wish you could see her. All right, my 5th tip is to create master studies. I literally just made an entire video about why I think creating master studies is such a valuable thing to do. So go watch that video if you haven't seen it yet. I'll put a link to it here somewhere. But again, this is a great thing to do in those moments when you come home from work and you really feel like, I can't do it today. I cannot make artwork. I know I personally work in the STEM field, so nothing related to artwork at all. And oftentimes I'll come home from work at the end of the day and I feel like my brain is just like completely depleted and I have nothing left to give. But I've also heard that a similar thing happens for those of you who work in a more creative field where you are leaning on your creativity all day, and so by the time you come home at the end of the day, you are kind of creatively drained and struggle to be creatively inspired after work. So I think both of these scenarios are very valid, and enter master studies. I really think that a great way to get into a good creative flow is to just sit down and copy somebody else's artwork. Now, I hope this goes without saying, but master studies should be used for learning and practicing purposes only. You should never try and claim a master study as original artwork. You can never sell master studies that you create or try and use it commercially in any way. They're just there for you to practice and develop your art skills. Someone left a comment on my last video that I really loved, where it's basically like for those artists that you really love, but for whatever reason, you can't like take a workshop from them and learn directly. Maybe they've been dead for 400 years, or maybe they live around the world from you. They don't offer online courses, or whatever. Doing a master study is a great way to learn from those artists that you really love. But on top of that, I think one of the benefits of doing master studies as part of your regular art practice while you're working full time is that doing a master study cuts out so many of the creative oh my god, it's so loud. Doing a master study cuts out so many of the creative decisions that you have to make when you're doing your own original artwork. I just find that they're such a beautiful way to make lovely artwork when your brain just can't handle making a million creative decisions. Like, there are some times that I just really want to paint, but I feel very intimidated by the blank page, or I feel like my energy is just so drained that I couldn't possibly come up with a great idea to paint. So in those moments, sitting down and just recreating artwork from an artist you love is a great way to maintain that creative practice in a way that doesn't require a massive amount of creative energy on your part. Anyway, I have a lot to say about master studies, so go watch that other video if you haven't seen it yet. All right, the 6th tip I have is to follow your body's natural energy. You'll have to forgive me because the people working on the siding on this apartment are literally right outside the window. So I'm so sorry for the background noise. But anyway, what I'm talking about is whether you're a morning person or a night person. So if you are a morning person, you might find a lot of value in like setting aside an hour before you start work every morning to just create artwork. If you're a night owl, like I am, you might find that it feels a little bit more natural to wait until after work to set aside your time for creating your artwork. I think both options are totally valid. You should just listen to your own body and your own kind of natural flow to figure out what works best for you. I also just would like to flag that I don't think any of this is like set in stone at all. Like, for example, throughout all winter, when it feels like it's just dark all the time, especially I'm in Boston and it gets dark at like 4:30 p.m. It's rough. I would say 100% of the time I'm creating artwork at night because I'm naturally a night owl. It's dark all the time, so it doesn't make that much of a difference if I try to do it in the morning versus night, so it's always at night. But now that we're in the spring and coming into the summertime, there's a lot more light in the morning and light in the evening, so I naturally find that the mornings are a lot easier for me in the spring and the summer than they are during the winter time. So while probably still 80-90% of the time I'm creating artwork at night after work because that's just my natural flow. In this time of year when it's lighter out, I am up earlier, I am feeling more inspired in the mornings. I'm not feeling like completely groggy and drained all the time because I'm so impacted by the sunlight. So all that to say, go with the flow, listen to your own body's natural energy, and create artwork on that schedule. All right, my 7th and final tip is to be kind to yourself. Sometimes you're just not going to have the creative energy to make art, and that's okay. There are some days or even some weeks at a time where my day job has like completely wiped me out. I'm feeling so drained, so exhausted, and like the last thing I could possibly do is something that is going to prevent me from getting in bed sooner, you know? Sometimes there's a huge push during my day job to meet some crazy deadlines that leaves me feeling completely depleted. And after I've done all of my other after work things, I just have no energy left to make art. And that is normal. And it's totally okay if you feel like that too sometimes. And, you know, this is a balance. You might feel like this is contradictory to some of the stuff I said earlier. But while there is, of course, there's so much power that comes with being able to create artwork when you're feeling uninspired, I really also don't think that you should really force anything that doesn't feel right. If your body is telling you that you need to slow down and that you need to rest, then you should rest. I always go back to that analogy about how you can't pour from an empty cup, and I know that applies to a lot of different things, but it really applies to your creative energy as well, where if you are totally drained, you're completely exhausted, and you feel like you have nothing left to give, then your creativity is obviously going to suffer. So in those moments, sometimes taking a step back and not creating artwork is actually the best thing that you can do for your creative practice. Because by resting, by listening to your body, you're allowing yourself to refill that cup, to refill your creative energy, and be able to come back to that practice feeling rested and rejuvenated. Okay, so those are the tips that I have and that I've kind of collected over time while maintaining my art practice and working full time. And something I want to be really clear about is that I can sit here, I can give you all of the tips and tricks in the world, but I 1,000,000% do not want to come across like I have it all figured out and I've perfected the art of being someone who works full time and also being an artist all the time, and it's easy and it's no problem for me, because that is not true at all. The reality is that sometimes a whole week goes by and I haven't even touched my sketchbook in that week. Sometimes work and life stuff gets really crazy. Like right now, I'm in the middle of moving to different apartments and I'm also trying to do this YouTube thing, and so it's crazy. My life's a little bit chaotic and I can't make artwork every single day, and that's okay. I have a lot of forgiveness for myself and I don't hold a grudge against myself, and I want to give you permission to do the same thing. Just because you didn't make artwork today or yesterday or for the last week or for the last month doesn't mean that you are any less of an artist. At some point, I would love to do some kind of like daily challenge, something that gets me in a creative routine where I'm incorporating creating artwork into my schedule every single day. And I think that works really, really well for some people, but it's just not something that I've had the capacity to do right now with my current work life art situation. But I do think that could be a great way to maintain a consistent creative flow for those of you who do have the capacity to incorporate that into your life right now. So I know that, like I said at the beginning of this video, there are a lot of you who are in a similar situation where you're balancing that full-time job or other full-time responsibilities with maintaining your regular art practice. So if you have any other tips that you have picked up over the years while trying to balance these two big things, I would really love to hear what advice you have for those of us who are trying to strike this balance. Anyway, that's all I have for today's video. If you think I've earned it, I would really, really love it if you could give this video a like. And also, if you enjoyed watching this video, I think you may also really enjoy this one right here, where I take you along with me for a regular week in my life, where I can show you really what it looks like to work this full-time job while also creating artwork regularly. So with that, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for sticking all the way until the end. You are truly a real one, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Take care, everyone.